Welcome to Resume the Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Page, and I'm here to spread the message that you can, in fact, be happy in your career. I'm a former executive recruiter turned career coach, and I am obsessed with learning about why people have chosen their career, what led them to that decision, and how they achieved happiness in the process. So, come join the ongoing conversation that exposes you to career paths of all origins with one thing in common: happiness. So, press play and let's resume the conversation with this week's episode. Our guest today is Kevin Palmieri. Kevin is the CFO and founder of Next Level University, Next Level Podcast Solutions. He's a podcast coach, a peak performance coach, and a speaker. His podcast, Next Level University, is a global top 100 self-improvement podcast with over 1,200 episodes, about 750,000 listens. It's global, and Kevin co-hosts that with Alan Lazaros. Kevin has overcome some pretty massive personal roadblock, hitting rock bottom and finding a way through it. And he now brings that heart-driven but no BS approach he found along his own journey to holistic self-improvement to dream chasers all over the world through his services and his podcast.
Courtney, thank you so very much for having me. Thank you for the wonderful introduction.
Awesome. So how often are you in the recording booth?
So we batch them. Yesterday we recorded 8.
Okay.
So then today I have coaching calls and we have business meetings. So we try to do 7 or 8 in one day, and then I'm on a bunch of other shows. But yeah, we drop one every single day, hopefully forever. That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah. And I just wanted to start out, I'm a career coach. And when I was creating my coaching brand and program, after 1,000 iterations of what I wanted to bring my clients and the world, one of the words that I knew I had to preface career coach with was holistic. And going through and doing some research about you and your company, that word shows up a lot throughout your branding and your website and all of that, which I love, obviously. And I just wanted to start out by asking you, what does holistic mean to you? Because some people might hear that word and think it's a little woo or not really fully know. What does that mean? I know what it means for me, but what does that mean to you?
For us, it means well-rounded. I was somebody who I've had physical success. I won a bodybuilding show, but my mental health was not in a good place. I've had financial success, but my relationship suffered. I desire to have a well-rounded life that is synchronized. Life is love, health, and wealth. That's really what we think of when we think of life. So how do we help people get to the next level of all those? That to me is what holistic stands for in our business.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that trying to approach like one component of your life, really difficult to do in a vacuum because everything else touches it. And it's just like you said, if one thing is out, everything else is going to feel that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it was curious to know.
Of course. There's layers, right? That's the interesting thing is we can do an episode on 5 ways to make more money. But if you have a block around money because you were raised without a lot of money and you have a scarcity mindset and you don't think you deserve money, 5 ways to make more money isn't going to help you. It's just, that's a lot of tactics that's not really going to land at the identity level that you're currently dealing with. So that's really the approach is how do we help the human, the identity, and then how do you take the behaviors after that? And hopefully they'll be more aligned and more powerful.
And so I like to also start out by asking pretty much everyone who comes on, if you were at a dinner party and someone came up to you and asked, what do you do? What would your answer be?
This has changed over the last 6 years. Yeah. I can promise you that. I say I'm a podcaster. If there was a name tag, it's I am a podcaster. I am a podcaster first. I didn't start that way though, because I was embarrassed in the beginning. I left a 6-figure job because I was so miserable to start this podcast business. And in the beginning, you're not making any money. Nobody cares. Nobody's listening. And it's been a very interesting, and I've talked about this before, it's been a very interesting journey where now it's really cool when I say I'm a podcaster. And people are like, what do you mean? That's your job? Like you podcast for a living? In the beginning, I got laughed at. So now I'm proud to say I'm a podcaster. In the very beginning, I won't say ashamed, but I was definitely hesitant and or embarrassed.
Yeah. And did you always answer with podcaster during those times when you were a little?
I think I tried, but you could probably tell in my voice that I wasn't super confident in what I was doing. Mm-hmm. Now I know my wife and I went to a wedding recently, and I said, eventually when somebody asks me what I do, I'll end up being some part of interest. Mm-hmm. I know that's interesting to a lot of people because most people don't know a podcaster who does this full time, right? It's just rare. So in the beginning, there wasn't a lot of accolades and there wasn't a lot of success. So I knew there wasn't a lot of perception behind it. Now that we've built a business, it's actually valuable to share that, which has been very interesting for me.
Yeah. And just going off of that, what did you want to be when you were a kid? Because obviously podcasting was probably, I'm not going to age you, but it's relatively new. And it probably wasn't around when you were a kid. So what was that like? When I grew up, what did you want to be?
The first thing I can remember is I wanted to be a stuntman, a professional wrestler, and then eventually it was a baseball player. Those were the big three for me. I loved professional wrestling and I was like, wow, that would be really cool. So my cousin and I used to play pretend wrestling. Mm-hmm. And then I was always good at just taking a beating. I was just really good at that. I could handle a lot of pain. So I was like, wow, being a stunt person would probably be pretty interesting. And then I started playing baseball when I was 9. And then after that, it was, if I could do this for a living, that would be pretty cool. But I never took it super seriously, not as serious as I needed to.
Okay. Because of why?
I don't know. Here's the thing, right? I was naturally good. I was naturally athletic. I was a hard worker, but not as hard as I needed to be in order to get to where I wanted to go. And honestly, I don't really think I actually believed I could make a life out of baseball. For me, low self-belief has been it's been a struggle for me for most of my life. I dealt with low self-belief, low self-worth, not feeling good enough, not feeling smart enough, not feeling enough. That's really a huge part of my story. So I had a relationship with skill based on what I thought was luck. I thought I just got lucky more than most people at baseball. I never really connected that, oh, you're actually pretty good at this. You're not really lucky. You're good. You're talented. It was very hard for me ever to own that. So obviously, it would have been really hard for me to continue progressing forward with that mindset.
Yeah. So when you came to that realization of, okay, maybe baseball isn't the thing, because I think those types of things like baseball, or if like when I was a kid, I wanted to be an actor, and those kind of almost like 1 in a million type of professions are a very common childhood dream. And I think a lot of people could relate to what you're saying, where they may not recognize what talent they have, or they have the talent, but not the work ethic, or they don't have the support to go after it, or even know how to navigate that kind of path. I think that's one, very relatable. And 2, I'm just wondering, when you did decide, oh, that's not going to work, that's just not going to be my path, what did you end up going into? Was it related in any way, or was it like a complete like random thing?
So the thing about me is I am all over the place. I've always been just all over the place. So after baseball, I started training mixed martial arts because I wanted to be a professional fighter. I remember watching fights and thinking, I could do that for sure. I could definitely do that. I can take a beating. I love stuff like that. I love physicality. I'm in. So I started training grappling and I started training Muay Thai, so striking. Okay. And I was like, this is it. So I was pumping gas at a gas station. I would work from 6 a.m. till 2 p.m. I would go home, change into my gym clothes. I'd go lift weights for an hour and a half, go home, eat dinner, and then I'd go grapple for 2 hours. And that was my life. And I loved it. It was such a simple life filled with fulfillment. And in retrospect, looking back, I didn't realize how much I enjoyed it because it seemed like a sacrifice and it seemed like I had to do it. But I enjoyed that very much. And that was the next leg of my journey was saying, I'm going to fight in the UFC. That is what I'm going to do next.
What did you mean when you say you felt like you had to do it?
My life was very regimented, where I wasn't really doing a lot of things that other people were doing. I was taking my fitness very seriously, and I was getting up at 5 a.m. and I wouldn't get home from grappling until 9 or 10 at night. And my day was just pay the bills and then get better physically. Pay the bills and then get better physically. So I just felt different than everybody else because I felt like I was shooting for a goal that was going to require so much of me. Like you can't miss. You can't. Yeah. You're going to be fighting against people who this is their life, right? So I think there was that subconscious pressure. And honestly, I have a lot of that pressure now based on what we're doing. So I think that gave me a little bit of a preview into what life as a quote unquote high achiever, high performer might look like, which I'm grateful for because it helped me for sure.
No, yeah. And I love that there's a Steve Jobs quote, which is like, I'm going to butcher it, but it's like, you can only connect the dots looking backward. Mm-hmm. And all of those little random things are like that. Muay Thai and podcasting has nothing to do with each other,
right?
Unless you're doing a podcast about it. But so I love always hearing those types of weird connections, because I think a lot of people on their career journey will be like, this is so pointless. Like, why am I, especially someone like out of school doing point and click work or whatever? I don't think there's a wasted experience personally. And I think what you're saying underlines that. And something that I'm curious to ask you about in terms of UFC and all of these are pretty like big dreams, right? And pretty big like achievements that you wanted to go for, which I love, like big dreamers, because like, why not? Like, why not dream big? It takes the same amount of energy to dream big as it does to dream small. So you might as well. So what happened with UFC? What happened? Did you get there? What was that journey like?
It's hard for me to say this. I think I talked a big game, but I didn't really walk the walk when it came to a lot of that stuff. I didn't train hard enough. I just didn't. I took it pretty seriously, but not seriously enough to get to the levels that I wanted to get to. What happened was I ended up tearing my shoulder. So I was grappling and I ended up tearing my shoulder and I had to get surgery. And I remember thinking that was the first time where I was like, I probably should have a plan B here.
Okay.
Because is this the only injury I'm ever going to get in physical combat with somebody else? Like, this is probably going to happen. UFC, it was super early at that time. Money wasn't like it is today when it comes to fighting. So yeah, that kind of died off. And honestly, that's when I lost the luster for big dreams at that point. I think it broke me and made me say, it's time to get realistic, because you're 20, you're about to be 20 now. You got to figure out your life. So I worked at the gas station and I said, you know what? I think I'm graduating from here. Right? This was a season. It's time for me to move on.
Okay.
I'm into fitness. I'm in shape. I'm going to be a personal trainer. Makes sense. That's the next logical step.
Yeah.
I'm a personal trainer.
Totally.
Let's do it. So out of the kindness of my heart and trying to be a good human, I told my boss that I'd be looking for a new job. I got fired the next day. They called me at 5 o'clock.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. So fired. The very next day, don't show up. You're fired. You don't have a job here anymore. It's like, oh, okay. That's not good. So I'm broke. I don't have any money and I have to find a job. So I ended up finding a job at a hospital cleaning floors and bathrooms, and I worked overnight. So I'd work 11 at night to 7 in the morning. I'd get up, I'd leave work, I'd go to the gym, and then who knows? Some days I would stay up for days on end. Other days I'd take a nap, dependent. But I knew that was an in-between, right? Like I don't aspire to that. Nothing against you if you're doing that. That just wasn't what I aspired to. So I said, okay, what's next? So then I got a job as a personal trainer.
Okay.
And I was like, this is it. I'm in. This is great. I have never been a personal trainer. I just got hired at a very high-end boutique personal training thing. It was a private gym. Okay. It wasn't like a big gym. There was only 3 rooms. You had your own room. You and your client went and worked out in there. It was perfect. But another part of my story is there's usually more to everything than you realize.
Yeah.
They were not happy with my sales acumen. So when I signed up for this job, I signed a contract that said I would stay there for a year or I would pay $1,000 to cancel my certification, basically.
Oh, gotcha. Depending on how many clients you would get and all of that.
Yeah. We're 6 months in. My pay has already been cut twice because I'm not performing as a salesman. I went in and I said, I'm done. And they said, just friendly reminder, you're going to have to pay $1,000. Like cash, check, what do you want? I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm over it. I'm not doing this anymore. I paid $1,000 to get rid of that job. And then I didn't have anything. I had no plan B. I had no other thoughts or prospects of jobs. So I ended up connecting with my uncle who worked at a building supply company. So I became a forklift operator and a truck driver at this building supply company. This is where things start to get a little interesting. I would get in the truck at 6 o'clock in the morning and I would listen to the Hillman Morning Show, which is a Boston-based talk show in the morning.
I'm from the Boston area.
Do you know the Hillman Morning Show?
I've heard of it. I don't think I'm from Chelmsford.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah. I live in Nashua, New Hampshire, which is probably.
Oh yeah. That's where I was born.
Yeah. So it's a small world. There was this morning show that was very popular in Boston, and I would listen to it every morning. And then I would listen to sports talk radio for the rest of the day. And I remember thinking, imagine, and to your point, you cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back. Mm-hmm. Imagine if you could talk into a microphone for 4 hours a day and that was your job. Imagine how awesome life would be if that's all you had to do. I stayed at that job for a year and a half. I was working 50, 60, 70 hours a week, miserable, hated it, don't want to do it. So I did what I do. I walked into the office and I quit. And I said, I'm done. And I got laughed at because I said, I'm going to go to the fire academy. I'm going to be a firefighter. That's what I'm going to do.
Okay.
And everybody laughed at me. 20, probably 22, 23.
Oh, okay.
Then, so I got laughed at. They all laughed at me. They're like, you don't have another job. And I said, I've done this before. I don't know. There's something wrong with me. I don't know why I keep doing this. So I end up going down to my town fire station, and they happened to be looking for on-call firefighters, volunteer firefighters that they were going to send to the fire academy. Perfect. Awesome. So I signed up for that. One of the other guys who was going through the fire academy was a construction guy, and he had a house that he was renovating. And he said, hey, are you looking for work? I said, absolutely. What a coincidence I am. He said, you have any construction experience? I said, no, but I like working with my hands. I'll figure it out. He said, all right, cool. You're hired. We're renovating a house. We'll pay you $15 an hour. I'm going to pay you for 40 hours, even if you only work 30. All right, cool. I'm in. Let's do it. So I did that for, 4 months, graduated the fire academy. I got certified as a level 1 and level 2 on-call volunteer firefighter. And then I went, and this is where things got weird for me. Then I went to a job fair because that building that we were working on was done and I had no prospects of jobs again. Here we are. I got to figure it out. Okay, cool.
Okay.
So I go to this job fair and I was learning something called weatherization. Mm-hmm. All weatherization is you go into somebody's house and you save energy. So you work in the attic and you seal holes and you check out the windows and the doors and all that stuff. So I go to this job fair. I take the 2 or 3 days. We get to the end, and on my exit interview, I was talking to the head of this, and she said, okay, we have a really good company we want to connect you with. The only downside is, 1, they don't work on houses. So you're gonna have to learn way more than you've learned. Mm-hmm. 2, there's a lot of travel. And 3, they're based in Boston. And I lived in Uxbridge. I don't know if you know where Uxbridge is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's where I lived. So I said, an hour and a half in traffic. And I said, not going to do that. Yeah. I have no interest in driving into Boston every day. They said, you're going to be making $60 an hour. And I said, this is not real. There is 0% chance I'm real. I don't believe any of this.
Wait a minute.
Yeah. How is that going to happen? Please tell me.
Yeah.
And they said, you know what? We're going to connect you with them. We'll let you talk to the owner and you can see what happens. And I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I end up talking to the owner. He says, hey, come in for an interview. And I said, all right, this is interesting. So I'm dressed in the finest stuff I have at that time. Not very nice.
Sure.
So I go to the office and he's outside working. So I helped him work in my nice clothes. And he said, whatever it takes, right? Whatever it takes.
I love it. Yeah.
And he said, you have a really good personality, Kev. I think you're going to be a really good fit for the team. I'm actually going to bump you to the front of the line. And I was like, I still don't know what any of this means. I still don't know what this job even consists of. I don't really even know what you guys do. So whatever. I'm at the front of the line. Awesome. So I get a call.
Thing to hear.
It's a good thing to hear, other than the fact that I'm terrified because I have no idea. I've just met this man and I have no idea what I'm doing.
You're like, I'm really good at something that I don't even know what it is yet. Yeah.
Sometimes personality gets you indoors that you don't have the skills yet. And that's something I've learned over time as well, which is, obviously a positive thing, but it's also scary. I get a call maybe a month later. And at this point, I am broke. I have $0 to my name. I remember I was at the movies with one of my friends, and I know in retrospect, I shouldn't have gone to the movies because I don't even know how I got the ticket. I get a call from my boss, and he says, hey, we just landed a big job in Delaware. You're in. Are you good? And I said, yeah. He said, all right, we're going to leave 2 weeks from today. And I was like, okay. The day of that traveling, I go to the office in Boston. I get in a vehicle with a man that I have met one time. Never met. This is the second time I've even seen this person. We drive 8 hours from Boston to Wilmington, Delaware. We go to this house that we have rented, and I proceed to move in with 6 other people I've never met and then do a job I had never done before. And before we were getting ready to leave, he said, I have to make sure you're just going to get paid less than everybody else. So you're going to get paid $10 less than everybody else because you're on probation. And I was like, there it is. I knew there was a catch. I absolutely knew there was a catch.
They got you all the way down there.
Then he said, you're going to be making $50 an hour instead of 60. And I said, what? No way. This is not real. This is something is astray. I end up working my first week. The people there were awesome. And I remember getting my first check for 40 hours at $50 an hour. And I was like, oh my God, I'm home. This is it. I am never, ever going to do anything else. And that was the job that I ended up working that for the next 3 years, I think. Okay.
All right. So in Delaware, you were like traveled around?
We were everywhere.
That's pretty cool.
It was, but it's cool when it's novel. But the year I made the most money with that company, I lived in hotels for 10 months straight. Yeah. And it was, it's hard to hold down a relationship. It's hard to stay healthy. I used to bring a hot top and I would cook like eggs in the hotel room, and that's just not super sustainable. And I was bodybuilding, so I'd be going to the gym twice. I would wake up at 4, go to the gym and do cardio. I'd work an 8-hour day, and then I would go lift at night while cooking salmon, of all things, in the hotel. It wasn't super sustainable, Courtney.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. I'm not an athlete by any means, but I'm a very physical person. Like I have to work out. Otherwise I feel it's more of a mental thing than it is physical. And also I'm sure you can relate how you feel in your body really informs your self-esteem and whatever you're comfortable with. So you started out wanting to play baseball and then UFC and then construction, which is, I actually used to recruit for a bunch of construction companies in the Boston area, funny enough. It's a really intense physical job. What is it about, like, where did that need to work out and that need to be physical and be connected to your body? Where did that come from? And what do you get from that connection?
I started lifting weights when I was 15. I was tiny. I was 5 foot. At that point, I was probably 5'3". I'm 5'4" now, maybe 5'5" on a good day. I never got picked on for being short, which was interesting. So it wasn't that. It wasn't really the pain. I just knew that I couldn't grow this way. So I was like, I can grow other ways. So I'm gonna see what this whole fitness thing is about. That I always looked up to people that were in shape. I used to watch Rocky and Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, and that many young men do.
Yeah.
That's really where it started for me. And I don't know, I think there's also this interesting piece of me, and this is like deep. I want to protect the people that I love. I don't know where that comes from. It makes me super emotional when I talk about it, but like, I don't ever want anything to happen to somebody that I care about that I could control. I don't ever want somebody to be around me and not feel safe. Like, I want to be able to handle it. It's important to me, not from an ego place, but yeah, if something was to happen with me and my wife, you're not going to take my wife. Yeah. You're not going to take my wife. Not a chance in hell. And yeah, I've said that to my friends in the past. Like, when you're with me, I want you to be safe. And I don't know, maybe that's me catastrophizing stuff, but I've always had that belief that if something happens, I want to be the one to help. That's just the way I've always been. Raised by women, our community is women, our team is women. I tell the team all the time, I will go to war for you. I love you. It's my job. And I don't know why I always get emotional when I say that. For me, that's a big piece of it. I want to make sure I'm capable to take care of the people who, not that they're not capable of taking care of themselves, but maybe that's just not. Yeah. I'm very protective I'm very protective of the people I care about. And maybe it's because when you're training to fight for a living, you're not necessarily afraid of one of the things that most people are afraid of, right? Some of the worst times in people's lives are when they're fist fights with other people. That's what I was trying to do for a living. So maybe that's part of it, right? But I've always looked up to people who protected the most important people to them. So that's a piece of it for sure.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you're talking about that ability to have that agency over your body if you need it. That was something for me. So I have 2 kids and I had not great pregnancies. I was like a very unhappy pregnant person. I did not enjoy it. I liked the end result, but I did not enjoy being pregnant. And one of the reasons that I had such a tough time, other than other complications, was because you're limited. Like, you're very limited in your, like, a thought that just kept going through my head was like, what if someone tried to mug me when I'm pregnant? I'm a runner, and I'm not going to, even though I ran when I was pregnant, I'm not nearly as agile. And there is that sense of self-protection and protection for others. So I don't think that's crazy. I think that's a very primal instinct to have. And so long as it isn't detrimental to your life and you're not in an anxious place about it. But yeah, that's interesting because that was something that I really grappled with when I didn't have that ability to run.
I can imagine.
Away. Yeah. So that's really interesting. And so now you still obviously you work out all the time. Is it different now working out after having found, and correct me if I'm wrong, your purpose and you're very aligned with what you seem to be doing? Is the workout, does it feel different? Do you approach it differently than you did when you were going out for baseball or going out for UFC training? Any of those? Is there a different mentality that you approach it with?
No, not really. I had a moment last night where, so my business partner and I, we're having technical issues on his end. So I drove an hour and a half to his house. We recorded 8 episodes and I left his house at 10 o'clock. And I told him when I left, I was like, there's a part of me, and it's a sicko part of me. I'm excited to get to the gym and suffer. I'm excited to get there and say, this is really going to suck. There's a part of me that likes the humility that comes with that. I like when certain things are challenging because I don't want to get an ego. I don't want to get arrogant. I don't want to get entitled. There's something about fitness that is just real. The weights don't care. They don't care if you had a good day. They don't care if you want to look good. They don't care if it's on social media. They don't care. They don't have any feelings. For me, it's one of those places where I actually feel like I can just lean into my ego. It's just me against me. And you're either going to lift the weight or you're not. And you don't get to feel bad about it if you don't. Just go do it. There's that very primal side of me too, that I go to dark places when I work out. I like to suffer. I like to sweat. I like to...
Is that? Why do you like to suffer? That has come up a lot. Why do you like to suffer?
I don't know.
Where does that come from? Oh my goodness.
I don't know if it's optional.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like it is. It seems like it's just something that you live with.
I don't know if it's optional for most people. I think most of us are going to suffer. I have this practice, and I don't know. Maybe there's something wrong with me. I don't know. I have this practice every day when I have 2 cats. One of my cats jumps up on my desk every day, Fudge. And when I first got him, I would shoo him off. I'd say, come on, dude, I'm working. I need to be in flow. I'm productive, blah, blah, blah. Then I had this moment where I said, one day he's not going to be here and you're going to wish you spent more time with him. And you're going to regret that. Every single time I do it now, I take a minute, I kiss him, I let him do whatever he wants, because there's that part of me that knows I'm going to suffer if I don't allow myself to feel that now. I don't know what that is. I think
it's big picture. It's just having that big picture mentality. I think animals, it's interesting that you brought your cat up because I think I love animals. One of my first jobs was working in a veterinarian's office, and I grew up riding horses when I was around big animals a lot. And I have an 85-pound lab who thinks he's 6 pounds, and I tell people he's my first child and my daughter's my firstborn. But I think animals have a way of, they're so unconditional in their love that they just have a way of bringing perspective, I think. And I think what you're getting at is that feeling of taking advantage of the moment and being in the moment, as opposed to letting that suffering overcome you and own you. Yeah. Yes, Fudge isn't going to be here forever. None of us are going to be here forever. And it's so interesting because I have so many things popping into my head right now. In Buddhist teachings, there's the idea of suffering is huge. And that's just the life is suffering. And then it's going through that suffering to reach enlightenment. And you can't reach enlightenment without going through the suffering. And the whole lotus flower symbol is the fact that it grows through mud to come out and be the lotus, this beautiful flower. So yeah, I do think a lot of people really struggle with that feeling of suffering. And I love that you brought it up. I love that this is like a thread because it's so, it's just something that so many people, deal with, especially in terms of, the big questions like the career and what am I supposed to do and all of that. So thank you for bringing it up throughout this and so openly. And thank you for bringing up Fudge.
Of course.
He deserves a spot here.
Of course. He's my little boy. That's my next tattoo. I'm going to get them on my hand. That's my next one. Nice. Fudge and Ace, both of them. Yeah.
Did you get them at the same time or you did? Okay. Cool.
Yep.
You go through this whole journey. You seem to be pretty open to experiences. And I'm wondering what type of, I think expectations are a big thing that people have to deal with, whether they're external from on a micro level from parents or siblings and friends or coaches, whatnot, or internally from yourself or on a very macro level, society. So going through this journey, you did hit a lot of roadblocks and you kept finding like a new way. Some might call that grit. And how did you deal with any expectations that were placed on you did you have any expectations placed on you from your parents or teachers or anything like that? Or were they mostly like internally inflicted?
Yeah, I'm blessed because nobody in my family went to college. So I honestly don't think there was very high hopes for me. I was never pressured into going to college. When I said I wasn't going to college, nobody really pushed back because it's very hard to push back when you haven't done it. You can't really say, we didn't go, but you should. I don't know. I've always had a weird level of freedom for what I wanted to do with my life. And I think that's why I tried so many random things because nobody ever told me not to. I didn't know my dad, so I didn't meet my dad until I was 27. So my dad wasn't in the picture. But my mom and my grandmother were always supportive. Were they paranoid about what I was doing? Probably, but they never took wind out of my sails. No, I don't think there were a lot of high hopes for me. I was the kid from the broken home. I didn't have positive male role models. All of my friends' families always tried to adopt me in their own way. I don't think people expected a ton out of me. So the downside of that is people don't expect a ton out of you. The upside of that is if you do make it to any level of quote unquote success, people are really surprised. And there's also no pressure for you to go in a certain direction. So yeah, I think it gave me a level of freedom that I probably wouldn't have had otherwise.
I love that because I feel like so many people, that's a huge thing that some people have to overcome. And it's funny when you're talking, my husband actually has he has never met his dad and his grandmother and mom raised him. And the same deal, like the story he always says, I wanted to be a surfboard builder at one point. And his mom was like, yeah, go do it. Be the best one, but go do it. And he's like, you should definitely have said no to that. He is not a surfboard builder. But yeah, and I had the opposite upbringing where I was raised by my dad and you definitely were going to go to college. And it's just always interesting to see how different personalities, like you said, can get you into certain situations or get you out of certain situations and how you deal with what's given to you. And another thing that you said that I think is really, really relatable, the sales thing. I think that you're super personable and I could see you being great at sales just based on your personality. And sales is a huge part of a lot of jobs that you might not be aware of when you're like going to apply. And I'm curious to know what you felt in that moment when someone's like, you're not very good at sales, because a huge part of being successful is sales in anything, in podcasting, especially. You have to promote yourself and it's a very personal type of sales. So can you just talk about that a little bit? Like, how are you so great with promoting yourself in your show when you were doing something that you were like, oh, this is it. I love personal training. This really aligns with my whole thing. But I'm having trouble with the sales aspect of it.
I think the leadership just wasn't good. The way that they tried to convince me to sell was really inject high levels of pain into people. And that's just not me. That's not how I do it. So it was pretty much, hey, do you want to be around to see your grandkids? If so, you should really sign up for this package. No, not going to do it.
Whoa.
Yeah, not going to do it. Because here's the truth. This person's going to be fine. This person's not on the edge of death. If they don't have a personal trainer, they're going to be fine. It's not that big of a deal. That it didn't resonate with me. That put the bug in my ear that sales is sleazy.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
I've definitely struggled with that where I'm like, how do you promote yourself without being salesy or pitchy or easy is a big, and it's hard to do like in any. So how did you mitigate that going through what you do now?
It's interesting. I read a lot of sales books and I listened to a lot of sales books and I threw all of them in the garbage because it was all, here's the interesting thing. Many of the people who write sales books, they're selling to other super logical strategy-based people. So we call it M-brain and E-brain. E-brain is emotionally driven. M-brain is logic.
Sure.
These are And again, that's a blanket statement and many people are both and everybody has both. But a Grant Cardone...
It's almost like the right brain, left brain kind of idea kind of thing. Yeah.
A Grant Cardone sells to people who are M-brained. He doesn't, most of the people who listen to him are not emotionally driven because he's arrogant and I'm not about that. I don't want to sell like that. So now I understand that sales is nothing more than getting somebody to make a positive decision based on you guiding them for what's best for them. It's not about me. It's not about what's best for me. It's about what's best for you. And I have a firm belief that people can feel that. I had a client, her and I were working together. And she said, I'm going to work at a dealership and I'm going to be selling cars. What's your sales advice? And I said, simple. She's a very attractive young lady. I said, number one, you're beautiful. You're going to do fine. Number two, solve the people's problems. Just give them what they ask for. And I said, three, always think of them first. And I think she made $100,000 her first year. It's not because I had any breakthrough thought, just solve their problems. That is really my new thing. Is I was on a call today. I got a new client a couple hours before this call with you. I said, what are your biggest problems? Blah, 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 blah. Cool. Are you looking for help? Yes. Cool. What's your budget? This. Cool. Is this a line for you? Yes. Cool. I'll send the paperwork over today. That's it. There's no, you got to buy now. If you don't buy now, the price is going to double. No, don't do that. You got to sign the contract now. If you don't sign it, no, we don't have contracts. We have built our business and I sell, quote unquote, based on what's best for the person, not what's best for me. I also have a very high level of belief in what we do, and I didn't before. So obviously that's a piece of it. But now I understand it's more about having a conversation and finding a solution than it is backing someone into a corner to make them do something that they might not want to do and they might actually regret later.
Right. And I think that backing them into a corner, I know that any job that I ever had that was salesy, you can feel that when you're like, I don't like doing this. You don't have to be this intuitive like maestro to understand that feeling. It's pretty obvious. Yeah. And I think most people don't like that because it's very aggressive. So you said something, you didn't always feel super comfortable with your business doing that. What changed? Like, when did you start to feel really comfortable?
When I was the brokest, I would say. That's really when we went through a phase where I had been doing mindset coaching. Okay. And I think I was charging like $50 a call and then $75 and maybe I think it got to 100 early on. And I had somebody reach out to me, one of our mentors, and he said, you should really start doing podcast production. Mm-hmm. And I said, I don't think so. I don't really know that much. And I was like 400 episodes in, so I knew more than most people. But the belief thing, that's always been there. So I ended up meeting with someone, and he's a CEO of a financial firm. And I remember us having conversations, and he's like, can you do this? Can you do this? Blah, 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 blah. And it was just like, I'm just solving his problems. I don't have to, I'm not selling him. I'm not saying the right thing. I'm just like, what are your issues? Okay, I can help you. We ended up getting our first quote unquote high ticket client. And that's when I started to realize that there's always going to be somebody who is more comfortable talking about the numbers and the stuff. Mm-hmm. And the person who is more comfortable is usually the person who is in charge. And when I say in charge, I don't mean to our original point, backing somebody into a corner. It builds a level of trust.
Yes.
When you get on a plane and you see the pilot and they just seem super together and they're dressed super nice and they have their hair done, you're like, oh, okay, we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. Or they come over the intercom and they're a human who has very good communication. It just seems right. You trust that person. You're going to put your safety in their hands.
Yes.
That was a big piece for me, is just understanding when I talk to someone, they're expecting me to sell them. Mm-hmm. So all I have to do is show up and be myself and I'm going to be fine. And if it's going to work, it's going to work that way. That was my pivot. And I was super broke. So I had to get out of my comfort zone and figure out, like, why do I have a block around talking about money? Why do I struggle with that? Oh, because I was broke. I've always been, I was a broke kid who had a ton of
That was your normal, right?
Yeah, that was my identity. The necessity of being broke really helped me. It helped me double down and try to learn sales. And then when I learned sales, I said, oh, interesting. This isn't me. I'm not going to do it this way. Then I started to figure out what was the best flow for me. And it really is this. It's just a conversation and see what happens.
Yeah. And you talk a lot about limiting beliefs. And I want to go into, if you're comfortable, you're very open with the fact that you hit rock bottom, right? Mm-hmm. And I love that you're so open about it and you're so vulnerable about it, especially as a guy, because I think that is super needed in our society. And I hope that your vulnerability will help other men and women be comfortable with sharing when they're not okay and all of that. So I'm curious to know what you define as rock bottom.
Yeah, I had a couple. So in my story, I write that I found out rock bottom has a basement. So I found rock bottom and I figured,
read that and it was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, there's actually stairs that go lower if you find the door. My initial rock bottom was I was 25 and I had been at that high paying job for a few years now. And at the time I was making good money. I had a girlfriend who was a model. I had just competed in and won a bodybuilding show. So I was in the best shape of my life. I had a sports car. We had just moved into a new apartment. Everything from the outside seemed amazing, but I was a shell of myself. It's very hard to explain what a bodybuilding competition can do to you, but it took pieces of me that I will never get back. And never. It was terrible for my mental health. Again, I'm grateful I did it, and I had a great coach and I had supportive people around me. I just didn't realize it was going to take the toll on me that it did. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. So I ended up winning my show. I won my class, and awesome. I got 3 plastic trophies that says I'm in shape. Great. My girlfriend came to me one day and she said, "Hey, I'm leaving. I literally was afraid to tell you during your bodybuilding prep because I was afraid you'd kill yourself." I was just in a bad place. And she said, "I'm going to move across the country and I'm going to chase my dreams." And I was like, this sucks. Okay. She ends up leaving. And that was my initial rock bottom. Work got super slow. My bills just doubled. My landlord came to me one day and said, "Hey, I'm going to take your ex-girlfriend to court because her name is on the lease and your name is on the lease. And if she doesn't pay half," and I said, "I'm going to take care of it. I promise I will never miss a payment. Please don't. Just let me handle this. I'll handle this." So that was when I tried to focus on, okay, what is this about and what does this mean about me and how do I work on me? But my initial thought after that was I need to go make as much money as possible. That's what needs to happen. My bills just doubled. Work is slow. I need to grind my face off. So that was my initial rock bottom. That was a very lonely time for me. I live an hour and a half away from anybody I know. I didn't see people for days. I didn't speak to people for days on end. That was like fairly
isolating.
Very isolating.
Okay.
But that next year starts. So that was in October. The next year starts. I got a promotion at my company. So I'm a foreman now, which means I'm running jobs. And that was the year that I lived on the road for 10 months. It was the busiest year we had ever had. And I got to the end of that year and I made $100,000.
Okay.
$100,000. It was awesome. It was awesome. It was what I wanted. It was what I desired. That was the goal that I set. But I remember I was at my house standing at my kitchen table. I didn't have any chairs. My ex-girlfriend took the chairs. They were her chairs. I was never home, so I never got once. This is what it was.
Your
this is what it was at the time.
Apartment.
My chairless apartment. I slid open my final pay stub and I saw, okay, I made $100,000. But internally, nothing changed. I expected that to make me more confident. I expected that to make me feel more secure. I expected that to make me feel like I had a brighter future. None of that happened. Feel any of those things. So I realized that in that moment, and for most of my life, I'd lived unconsciously. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. So I started a podcast in 2017 called the Hyperconscious Podcast. I fell in love with podcasting as I fell out of love with my job. I know what it takes to get to the top of the mountain. I don't want to do it again. I know the gold isn't up there. I thought the gold was up there. That ain't it. I don't want to do it. I started calling out of work. I started leaving the job site early. I started showing up late. There's this homesick feeling, this homesick, depressed, anxious feeling when you're packing a bag, getting ready to leave for the week, and you just want to be home. Like it was so hard for me to leave. It just kept getting harder and harder. So eventually it got to the point where I had been thinking about it so much and I was so miserable and I felt so stuck and I didn't know what to do. I was in New Jersey, which is 6 hours away from where I lived at the time. My alarm clock went off at 5:30. I sat up, I slid to the edge of the bed. I was lacing up my work boots. And that morning, it was like there was 10 televisions on in my head at the same time, and every single one is on a different station. And one is saying, you're stuck here forever. You are not the type of person who gets this opportunity. Never mind the type of person who leaves it behind. Right. Identity stuff.
Yeah.
Limiting beliefs. If you do somehow work up the courage to leave, what are your friends going to say? Or you make more money than any of your friends. Yeah, I used to buy my friends stuff and they'd come to my place and I get food for everybody. And I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that. You make more money than anybody in your family. But what is your family going to say? And what are you going to do? You've really positioned yourself here where there is no plan B. That's been the MO of my life. What are you going to do? And that is the moment where I thought to myself, if I take my life, I will take my problems with me. And that was the rock bottom. I'm 6 hours away from anybody who cares about me in a crusty hotel room somewhere in New Jersey. It's just not a good time. Yeah. Now, I'm very blessed, Courtney, where I have positive people around me. I'm just super grateful to have amazing people in my life. I've always been so blessed, privileged. So I reached out to one of my friends and I said, hey, Alan, I'm struggling, brother. I don't know what's going on. I'm having these feelings, these thoughts, these emotions. I don't know what to do. And in his wisdom, he said many things. But the thing that really stuck out was over the last couple of years, your awareness has changed a ton, but your environments have remained the same. Okay. Throw that on a Hallmark card. So he said, I think it's time for you to change your environment. And I ended up leaving that job 3 or 4 months later. And then Alan, if you don't know, he's my business partner. So Alan and I went into business together. And yeah, that rock bottom basement moment was that. It was the walls are crashing in. I have no idea what to do. I don't believe I can do anything different. I reached out to somebody and I'm blessed I reached out to the person I reached out to, because I always say this. Some people might have just said, nobody likes their job, Kev. This is just how it goes. Come home, enjoy the weekend, have a few beers. I'm sure the feeling will go away. And I could have gotten any of those answers. I got the best answer I could have gotten, and I'm grateful for that. But it's also because I had somebody very positive in my corner that was truly rooting for me, which I'm eternally grateful for.
Yeah. And you had the self-awareness to even reach out to someone. A lot of people, I think, in that type of situation, you're so low that it's like, why would they even want to? I think that's a thought that a lot of people would have. Why would anybody even want to hear from me? So it's amazing that you had that ability to pull the phone out and call someone. So
I appreciate it.
Like, that's amazing. And thank you for talking about it.
Of course.
And I'm wondering, with limiting beliefs, I think coming out of that kind of depression, first, actually, I want to talk about something that you brought up in terms of setting goals. So you seem to have set these goals, right? And you reach them and realize, oh, the top of the mountain isn't as beautiful as I thought. The scenery isn't as grand as I thought. So there's something to be said about setting goals, but setting the right goals and how to cut through whatever chaos is going on in your mind and body to hone in on what the right goals are. So you clearly now have succeeded. You're a high achiever. You have this great thing going. And I'm wondering, how did you apply this ability to achieve goals to what you're doing? Was there like a moment that you were like, this feels really good and I can keep doing this, and I want to now apply my ability to reach goals to this?
When I left my job, I had this moment of, because I had $10,000 in the bank and that was it. I didn't have a business plan. Alan and I there was no business plan. We didn't know what we were going to do. Now I know he actually did. He's been thinking about this his whole life. So I'm very blessed to have that, but I had no idea what we were going to do. The thing for me was this: when I podcast, I'm super fulfilled. That's all I knew. I've never felt what I feel when I do this. I've never felt that before. I don't know what this feeling is. In the very beginning, so I ended up moving in with my other best friend. He's a real estate investor. So him and I were dream chasing together. It was awesome. The best thing in the world. Paying $500 a month to live with him. Awesome. Access to the full house. Great human. He's just a great dude. I remember thinking that I just had to find a way to make it to the end of the week. And then I just had to find a way to make it to the end of the month. And then at the end of the month, it would start over again. That was really what it was in the beginning for me. I had this understanding that many people find something that is very profitable and then they convince themselves that they're passionate about it. I did that. I used to say I loved my job. I never really loved my job. I loved the money. I loved what came with the job.
The status and the money and all of that.
Yes. I remember when my girlfriend at the time and I were applying to get apartments, she's like, do you think we'll get it? And I said, the pay stub I just sent over is the one from the job where I was making $120 an hour. We're going to get the apartment. We're going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Nobody else is going to send over $120 an hour pay stub, right? No, it brought a lot of that possibility. Yeah, it brought a lot of that. But I realized that's why so many people, they jump. It's almost like you jump in a pool and you dive down to the bottom to get all the rings and the coins, and then you try to get out of the pool as soon as humanly possible. I jumped in a pool that I actually love. And I said to myself, I need to figure out a way to swim. I don't ever want to leave this pool. I need to figure out how to stay in this pool. I need to figure out how to swim, how to float, how to tread water, how to build a raft, whatever. I need to figure out how to hunt. I love this so much that I need to figure out how to do this. That is where the grit of everything else came in. Alan told me this early. He said, if we survive 10 years, we will be unreasonably successful. He said, we just have to survive. That's it. Just survive. Just survive. And that has always been my thing, is the person who lasts the longest wins. And I have never quit tattooed on my arm. That's been my motto since I was 15. Like, I'm not super good at a lot of things. I'm very consistent. I'm a very consistent human being. But one thing I am good at is suffering. I don't know why. I don't know if it's from the bodybuilding, whatever. But that was my thought, is I just have to find a way to get to the end of the week, to the end of the month, to the end of the year. And then once we started doing that, and once we started getting clients, it was like, oh, wow, we actually could build a business. And then it was just, now how do I maintain the level of pressure that I'm under forever and get better and continue that? One of the things that sometimes is hard for me to share, because I don't want to sound egotistical or arrogant or anything. We didn't start this to make our lives easier. I didn't start this to work less. That's not why I started a podcast. That's not why we do what we do.
Right.
I genuinely feel like we can change the world. We're two of the most consistent people. We work really effing hard every day, and we're very into making this a mission, not just about money or anything. When I started to see that we're actually having like real impact with people, that's done. I'm in for life. I'm never going to find fulfillment like this anywhere else. I know that. And I know I would regret if I ever went anywhere else. So in the beginning, it just was survival. Honestly, that was the only thing on my mind, was I need to find a way to make $50 to pay this and $50 to pay this. And that was the first couple of years.
Yeah. Going back to that idea of limiting beliefs. And another thing that you said that I think a lot of people, I was actually on my way dropping my daughter off at school. I was listening to a podcast and this concept came up. And it's funny that you said it, that most people, like one of the main things that they are most conscious of maybe or worried about are their friends' opinions of what they do. Definitely. Right. It's not like what the world will think. It's like what their friends will think. And that I just think is crazy and very interesting. And so for you, limiting beliefs comes up a lot. And what have you learned in terms of dealing with, is there like a formula that you found to break through a limiting belief? Or is it each belief is so different or so differently ingrained in a different part of your upbringing or whatever? Just if someone came up and asked, I had this limiting belief. For example, let's say I see a ton of stuff about morning routines and my husband and I have been trying to get up before the kids and I'm not a morning person. How do I do that? And that's a limiting belief, right? On a very it's not very important. There can be other bigger ones, but what would your advice be for someone who's trying to they've recognized the limiting belief, but they just have no idea how to deal with it?
It's an unfortunate way the universe and the world is set up, because the only way to overcome a limiting belief is to lean into it. I'm yet to find a better answer and I know it's not a sexy answer and I know it's not the easy answer, but there is something called the confidence conundrum, where a person who lacks belief. So if you lack belief, you don't try. When you don't try, you don't get feedback or inputs. When you don't get feedback or inputs, you don't have an opportunity to improve. And it locks you into the cycle of, I can't do because last time I didn't get results, and that becomes life. What I always suggest is somebody finds a way to borrow belief through necessity, through public accountability. If you might have fear. You might say, I don't know if I can do this. If somebody say I come in and I say, Courtney, here's my cell phone number. I want you to text me tomorrow at 5 a.m. I'll text you back because I'll be up. And you and I are going to hold each other accountable to really have some great morning routines. If that instills a little bit of belief in you and you do it, the limiting belief changes. It's not that you can't get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's, I don't know if I could do that consistently. Okay, cool. The longer you do it, the more that limiting belief goes away. And then it's, I don't know if I could do that 7 days a week. Maybe you don't have to. Maybe that's a limiting belief right there. Maybe you only do it 5 days a week. The thing I've learned is most of us, I say this at speeches, fear is a fence. Fear is a fence that we walk up to and we look on the other side and we say, imagine what life could be like out there. But the problem is, unless you jump over the fence and face the fear, you kind of never get the inputs of what it's actually like. The only thing I can advise is look at the most recent irrelevant proof, but it has to be productive. Just as an example, I still deal with limiting beliefs to this day, even though we're successful in all these episodes and I still have those moments. I was going on a podcast recently and this person was a doctor for NASA. Didn't even know that was a thing. Seen it in movies. Didn't know that was a real job. I'd never applied for something like that. Really cool. Really cool.
Yeah.
But I had this moment, Courtney, where I'm in the green room getting ready to log in. And I said, there must be another Kevin Palmieri. There's no way I'm supposed to be on the show. Why? Why am I on the show? Then I had a moment where I said, okay, what's the most recent and relevant proof? So the most recent and relevant proof was I was on a show earlier that week with somebody who was getting their doctorate in psychology. And I had the same thought. I am not going to be able to hang here. This is going to be terrible. And I did the same thing. What's the most recent relevant proof? I was on with a therapist, whatever. The problem is, unless you do it the first time, you never get the recent relevant proof.
Yeah.
The only way to knock down the last domino is to knock down the first domino. That's the only way. That's just the way it works. You have to make it as small as humanly possible. Connecting back to when we were talking about goal setting, I think most people set goals that are way too big. I really do. Yeah. Because we're convinced that if your goals don't scare you, they're not big enough. Life scares you. You don't need your goals to scare the hell out of you. Because if they do, in retrospect, I probably should have set the goal to have one professional fight, not fight in the UFC. That probably would have done better for me because I actually probably would have done it. And then maybe I would have won and said, interesting. That wasn't as bad as I thought. I don't know. I know that might sound counterintuitive, but based on the coaching and based on my experiences and what's worked for me, that's what I would say is break it down to the smallest piece that is almost under the radar of the limiting belief. Last example, somebody reached out to me and said, I want to be a speaker. Cool. I'm a speaker. I can help you. The next logical answer is we have to get you speaking. That's the next thing. You know that. I know that. All right, let's talk about it. I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how outside of your comfort zone would it be for you to do a Facebook Live right now? She said 12 out of 10 can't do it. Cool. Don't worry about it. On a scale of 1 to 10, how outside of your comfort zone would it be for you to record a video to yourself and show nobody? She said 2, not enough. On a scale of 1 to 10, how outside of your comfort zone would it be for you to record a video and send it to me only? Just me. Promise I won't show anybody. And she said, that's probably like a 5 out of 10. Do that. She sent me a video. I said, you're way better than you think. Recent relevant proof. Recent relevant proof. That's the initial domino. That's what I would say. Find the smallest, we call it the lowest or the minimum viable belief. Like, what is the minimum viable belief that you actually think you can do? Go do that. And that's a nice little foundation for you to see the next thing. It seems a little bit closer when you do it that way.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because I was working with a client the other day and we were talking about this. And when you do that, when you find that small thing that you were able to do when you did it, the fact that you did it will then instill a trust in yourself. And then whatever the business, if it's speaking, the people you're speaking to will also feel that trust that you have, and you'll have a newfound sense of authority in whatever skill that is. And and I love that because it's like baby steps and it's habit stacking also. It all ties together. I love that. And something that you mentioned at the very beginning that I really wanted to go into with you, you mentioned the scarcity mindset. And I think that is something, a scarcity mindset as opposed to an abundant mindset. And you have your own podcast. You have a business where you help other people create a podcast. And some people might be like, that's weird. Like you're creating competitors for yourself. Like, Kevin, what are you doing? And instead you're like, no, I'm just helping people do this thing that I really love. Can you talk a little bit about just break that down a little bit, like the difference between that scarcity mindset? Because I think that's something that a lot of people have where it's like, there's not enough to go around, right? If you're doing the same thing as me, we can't both be doing the same thing because what if this one client goes to you and then I'm left with nothing and whatever. So can you break that down, scarcity versus abundant mindset and how you approach it?
Yeah, I don't know. As human beings, I think we treat all of this like it's very finite and very limited when most of the stuff we're dealing with is infinite. There's an infinite amount of money, right? Like there's so much money. There's so much money out there. Yeah, it's hard because in the beginning, I did have that mindset of, I don't want to help somebody build a podcast production team because if they do, then what if they take our clients?
Right.
That was it in the beginning. And then I also realized a couple of things. One, most people aren't going to do what we're doing. It's fine. That's totally fine. Most people aren't going to work as hard as we do and do 1,400 episodes. Like that's just not why they're doing this. So that's part one. The other part of it is, I think when we get connected to scarcity, it's because we don't believe in our own unique ability to create abundance. You'll never be scarce if you know you can create abundance. That's really the initial step is, what does scarcity mean to you? How does it show up? And where did it come from? Because most likely you didn't create it. I was broke as a kid. We talked often about how we were going to pay rent. There you go. That's it. That's it. And here's the thing. And this is the interesting part of it. You would expect the fact that I made so much money to make that scarcity go away. No, that's not how it works. I remember I texted Alan before Alan and I were business partners. And I said, hey man, I got a question for you. I know you like know numbers and stuff. You're smart. Can I ask you a question? He said, yeah, what's up? I said, I owe $7,500 on a credit card. Should I pay it off? And he's like, yeah, of course you should. He's like, how much money do you have in the bank? I said, I don't know, like 15,000. He said, yeah, why haven't you paid it off yet? And I was like, I don't know. I'm just like, what if something happens? That. I have $15,000 sitting in the bank and I have a $7,500 credit card and I could literally pay it off with half. And I didn't want to do it because I was so afraid of what happens now. There is something called productive paranoia. That wasn't it. So
where is the line then? Where is the line for productive paranoia and scarcity?
It's hard to say. Think of it this way. I was losing money by not paying it off because my interest rate was 20% on a $7,500 balance. It depends on your level of comfort and capability in yourself. This is what I would say. When we're talking about scarcity or abundance, this is all internal stuff. This is all identity, relationship, traumas, triggers. This is all past stuff. I think it would benefit us all to take a look into the past. That's always my thing is the way you feel today is not based on what you did yesterday, most likely. The way you feel today is probably based on the way you felt for your entire life. You just don't know because it's normal.
It's your normal, right?
It's your normal. I would start asking yourself, why? Why am I overly abundant? Oh, because every time I get money, I don't think it's going to hang around for long, so I just spend it. Interesting. Where does that come from? Oh, it was my caregivers did the same thing. Interesting. Okay. Why am I overly scarce? Oh my goodness. I grew up in a household where we didn't have that much money, so we had to hoard everything we had. Interesting. And I've seen that on both ends. I know somebody who her family is very successful now, multi-millionaires. When she was a child, she used to have to sleep with her Uggs on because they wouldn't turn the heat on because they didn't have enough money. Even to this day, she still is more scarce than she is abundant. I know somebody else who her family invested money for her and she will be a millionaire. She doesn't have to do anything. The money's there. She's going to be a millionaire, multi-millionaire in the next 10 years. She wouldn't buy a new laptop because she was convinced she shouldn't. She needs to hang on to the money. But I also know people who make $15 an hour who will go they'll get a car payment that's $650 a month. That's all childhood stuff. That's just all conditioning. So I would really sit with it and ask, why and how long have I been doing this? And let me see if I can connect some of the dots looking back. Right. Awareness is always the first step. Yeah. What you do with the awareness, that's dependent. You can hire somebody, you can work with a therapist. There's a lot of stuff you can do, but awareness is always the first step. And it's usually the best piece of advice I can give.
Yeah. And how it serves you. Like, how is that mindset serving you? Is it really serving you to get that high of a car payment? I don't know. Maybe it's not. Probably not. I think that's also something to keep in mind. Okay. You have been amazing with your time and I don't want to take advantage, but I have a 5-question kind of rapid response. So here we go. So don't think about it too much or think about it as much as you want. There's not really any rules. I'm not baked into rules. Okay. What advice would you give your younger self? And at what age would you give that advice?
18. I would give 18-year-old Kev the advice of 2 thoughts. 1, we assume that where people are today is where they've been forever. We assume that where we are today is where we're going to be forever. The reason they are where they are is because they've been doing things long behind the scenes that you've just never seen. Start doing those things. Start doing read 5 pages a day, brother. You read 5 pages a day for the next 15 years, you're going to be very successful. That just the time perspective. The time perspective is something that is super hard to understand. Now, with the understanding I have, I would try to give it to young, more ignorant Kevin.
And what is the best, specifically career advice that you would give or that you've ever been given?
I don't know if I was ever really given any good career advice, honestly. That's why I made so many rash decisions, probably. I would say when you're thinking of a career, make sure that you have fulfillment somewhere in the recipe. I know fulfillment doesn't pay the bills, but fulfillment creates longevity and fulfillment creates flow and it creates creativity. Fulfillment is one of the keys to life that a lot of us are just missing out on. I was missing out on it for a long time. So maybe you could think of it from the location to what I'm actually going to be doing, to the hours, to the benefits, somewhere in there. Just throw in fulfillment and say, how fulfilled would I actually be doing this job? I think that's the best advice I could give on that.
Yeah, I love that. What's your favorite quote?
The biggest difference between who we are today and who we want to be eventually is our habits.
Ooh. Okay. And what is the single best daily practice that you have in your life right now and why?
I don't know if I could pick one. I learn for 30 minutes every day. I've learned every single day for 30 minutes for the last probably 5 years, every day. I haven't missed. That's a big one. And then right now I've exercised every single day for the last month, pretty much. it's not even about the results. It's just a lot of us have our self-worth and our self-esteem attached to physicality, not just the way we look, but our just capabilities as humans. So
sure.
Yeah, that for you, if you're out there, it's probably the thing that attaches most closely to your self-esteem. If you can do something every day that builds your self-esteem, you're going to be a rock star.
Oh, I love that. Okay, my last question. What is your go-to pump-up song? Like when you're going to go do a workout, when you're going to go get on stage for speaking?
The song in the gym is Till I Collapse by Eminem and Nate Dogg, one of the OG gym songs. The song when I speak, it's called For This by G-Eazy. And it's basically like, I've waited all my life for this. I don't know if I have waited all my life for this, but when you and I go back and it's connecting dots, I don't know. I feel like I'm supposed to be doing what I'm doing and the way I'm doing it based on the story. So yeah, there's a part of me that thinks, okay, we finally made it to where we wanted to get to when we were a little kid. It's just drastically different than we expected. So those are my two.
Ooh, I love that. Because that, oh my gosh, that is something so huge, what he just said. Okay, so rewind, listen to that again. The idea that you have of success most of the time, like hold it lightly because it will end up probably being just as successful as the level of success that you're dreaming for. Sure, like that level, that feeling that you're going for, hold on to that. But I love what you said because the actual outcome is probably going to look vastly different or like something that you didn't even realize was a thing that was possible or even an opportunity that even existed. And that is something that I like to bring up in coaching with careers is that there are so many careers out there that people don't even know exist. And you can create your own career. Like there are no rules. So I love that you brought that up. And what's next for you? Well, what can we see from Mr. Kevin?
That's always such a challenging question. You're just going to see a lot of what we're doing today, just exponential, really. We're going to do an episode every day for as long as humanly possible. And there's a lot going on behind the scenes and we have an app and all this stuff. But I just want to show up. I want to be positive. I want to help people. I want to inspire people. I want to teach people. And ultimately, I want people, when I leave any situation, to be a little bit better off, whatever that means. More positive, with more humor. So you're going to just see the same thing, most likely, but there'll be a lot going on behind the scenes that'll allow us to do more in the front of the scenes.
Yeah. And you'll keep evolving. You're going to keep evolving. So the same thing isn't going to be the same thing.
That's true.
You're a new Kevin every day. It'll be different. Kevin, thank you so much. I loved this. You are just a light and you're awesome. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode. I'm so grateful for your precious time and energy. And if anything resonated with you, please feel free to share with a friend and subscribe. If you're interested in career coaching, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Courtney@resume-careers.com and follow me on Instagram at Courtney Austin Page. Thank you so much and see you next week.